December 1944, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The trees stood bare, stripped by winter. Their branches clawed at a gray sky that threatened more snow. The wind cut through the forest like a blade. Cold, merciless, unforgiving. Inside an M10 Wolverine tank destroyer, Private First Class Raymond Thompson watched through a frosted periscope. His breath fogged the glass with every exhale. His hands, wrapped in wool gloves that did nothing against the cold, gripped the elevation wheel. Waiting. Always waiting. 800 yards down the slope, through the skeletal trees and morning fog, he saw them. German tanks. A full armored column. 12 vehicles. Maybe more. Panzer IVs mostly. And at the front, leading like a predator, a Tiger IV, the heaviest tank the Germans had. Thick armor. Long gun. Capable of killing anything the Americans fielded. Behind the Panzers came half-tracks, infantry, support vehicles, fuel trucks, supply wagons, even a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun at the rear. This wasn't a scouting party. This was an assault column. Organized, disciplined, moving with purpose. Thompson knew where they were headed, the crossroads at Noville, a critical junction. If the Germans took it, they'd flank the American defenders at Bastogne from the north. The 101st Airborne, already surrounded, already freezing, already running low on ammunition, would be cut off completely. Thousands of men would die, or surrender. Either way, the German offensive would succeed, and Ray Thompson was the only American who could see it happening. He reached for the radio handset, tried again. Static, garbled voices, nothing clear, no orders, no confirmation, no permission to engage. His standing orders were explicit. Observe, report. Do not fire without clearance from battalion command, under any circumstances. The reason was simple. Friendly fire. In the chaos of the Battle of the Bulge, American units were scattered. Positions changed hourly. Nobody knew where anyone was. A shot fired at the wrong target could kill a dozen Americans. Reveal your position. Bring down an entire German artillery barrage in retaliation. So the rule was absolute. Wait for orders. Thompson had followed that rule for weeks. He'd watched German vehicles pass through his scope, counted them, logged them, sketched their routes in a notebook his mother had sent him. But he'd never fired. Not once. But now, staring at a fully exposed column moving through a bottleneck, a narrow forest road with steep banks on both sides, no room to maneuver, no room to scatter, Thompson realized something. Waiting wasn't caution anymore. Waiting was surrender. His loader, a kid from Ohio named Miller, whispered from behind him. "Thompson, what are we doing?" Thompson didn't answer. He was calculating. Range, wind, angle, target selection. He wasn't thinking about orders. He wasn't thinking about court-martial. He was thinking about geometry, about cause and effect, about what happens when you pull one specific stone from a wall. His hand moved to the firing mechanism. Miller saw it. "Ray, we don't have clearance." Thompson's voice was quiet, flat. "I know. They'll arrest you. Maybe." "Ray." Thompson adjusted the gun elevation, aligned the crosshairs. Not on the lead tank, not on the Tiger. On the third vehicle. A Panzer IV in the middle of the column. He took a breath, held it, and pulled the trigger. The M10 roared. The shell left the barrel with a sound like thunder splitting the earth. Snow kicked up around the tank destroyer. The whole vehicle rocked backward from the recoil. 800 yards away, the 3rd Panzer IV exploded. A direct hit. Flank penetration. The tank shuddered. Smoke poured from its hatches. Flames erupted. The German column stopped. Instantly. Confusion. Panic. Thompson's crew stared at him, shocked, frozen. Thompson didn't look back. He was already reloading, already selecting the next target. Because he hadn't just fired one shot. He'd started a pattern, a sequence, a surgical dismantling of an entire armored column. And he was going to finish it, with or without permission. This is the story of the gunner who disobeyed orders, who destroyed a German column alone, who rewrote the rules of engagement. Not because he was reckless, but because he understood something his commanders didn't. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing at all. 3 days earlier, inside a drafty Belgian farmhouse 3 miles behind the front lines, Ray Thompson sat with his tank destroyer crew. 15 other men filled the room. Gunners, loaders, drivers, all from the 700th Tank Destroyer Battalion. Their commanding officer, Captain Langston, stood at the front. A map of the Ardennes pinned to the wall behind him. Red marks everywhere. German positions, American positions. Question marks where nobody knew. Langston's voice was sharp. Listen carefully, because I'm only saying this once. The room went silent. As of 0600 this morning, German forces launched a major offensive. Operation Watch on the Rhine. Over 200,000 men. More than 1,000 tanks. They hit us with complete surprise. Our lines are collapsing. He pointed to the map. We don't know where all our units are. We don't know where the Germans are. Communication is spotty. Positions are changing by the hour. He paused. Let that sink in. Which means the biggest threat right now isn't the enemy. It's friendly fire. We've already had 3 incidents of Americans shooting Americans, because nobody knows who's where. Langston's eyes swept the room. So here's the new rule. Nobody fires without confirmation from command. I don't care what you see. I don't care how close they are. You do not give away your position unless you are ordered to engage. Is that clear? Voices murmured. Yes, sir. Langston looked directly at Thompson. Thompson, you're on observation duty. Ridge north of Novel. Good sight lines. Your job is to watch. Log movements. Report everything. But you do not fire. Under any circumstances. Understood? Thompson nodded. Understood, sir. Langston dismissed them. The men filed out into the cold. Thompson's loader, Miller, walked beside him. You think they're serious? About court-martialing us if we fire? Thompson didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the rule, about the logic behind it. It made sense. In chaos, discipline saves lives. Orders prevent mistakes. But there was another logic, the one Thompson had learned in Kansas, working in his father's engine shop, fixing tractors, studying angles. Sometimes waiting for instructions means the machine breaks, and by the time someone gives you permission to fix it, it's too late. Thompson finally said, "They're serious." Miller frowned. So what do we do if we see Germans? We watch, we log, we report. And if we can't report? Thompson stopped walking, looked at Miller. Then we make a choice. True. Who was Ray Thompson? Raymond Charles. Thompson was born in 1922 in western Kansas. Flat land, endless wheat fields. Sky so big it felt like you could see the curvature of the earth. His father ran a small engine repair shop. Fixed tractors, combines, anything with gears. Ray grew up in that shop, surrounded by grease and metal and the smell of diesel. But Ray wasn't just a mechanic's son. He was a thinker, a problem solver. He saw the world in angles, in distances, in cause and effect. When other kids played baseball, Ray calculated the arc of the ball. The optimal angle for a home run. The exact moment to swing. His mother, Anna, taught 7th grade math. She saw Ray's talent. Gave him books on geometry, trigonometry, engineering principles. By 16, Ray could look at a grain silo and tell you its height by measuring its shadow. Could estimate the distance to a barn by counting fence posts. His teachers wanted him to go to college, study engineering. But Ray's family didn't have money for college. So when the war started in 1942, Ray enlisted. The Army offered training, pay, a future. Maybe he got the training. The pay wasn't much. The future depended on surviving Europe. Normandy to the Ardennes. Ray arrived in Normandy 2 weeks after D-Day, June 1944, 22 years old, assigned to a tank destroyer battalion. His first combat was in the hedgerows, the bocage, narrow lanes, thick hedges, terrible visibility. He watched men die, friends, burned alive in burning vehicles, blown apart by mines, shot by snipers they never saw. Ray stopped believing in luck, stopped believing in safe distances. He started believing in patterns, in routines, in understanding how things worked. He carried a small notebook. Every German vehicle he encountered, he sketched it. Noted vulnerabilities, blind spots, how long it took for a turret to rotate, where the armor was weakest. Other soldiers called him the quiet one. He didn't talk much, didn't joke, didn't complain. But when it came to gunnery, he was deadly. Not fast, not flashy, just accurate, predictable in the best way. His commanders saw him as a good soldier, disciplined, smart, calm under fire. What they didn't see, what even Ray's crewmates didn't fully understand, was that Ray Thompson wasn't just a gunner. He was a tactician, a chess player, a man who could see a battlefield like a geometry problem. And in 3 days, that quiet gunner with the angle-obsessed brain would do something no manual had prepared him for. He would rewrite the rules, not because he wanted to, but because the rules had stopped making sense. December 19th, 1944. Morning. The fog hung thick over the Ardennes. Visibility maybe 200 yards. Sound distorted. Everything muffled. Ray Thompson sat in his position. A camouflaged M10 Wolverine, dug into a ridge overlooking a forest road. Perfect concealment. Perfect angle. Perfect trap, if anyone took it. Through his periscope, Thompson scanned the valley. Frosted glass, limited vision. He wiped the lens with his sleeve. Tried again. Then he saw it. Movement. A shadow in the fog. A tank. German. Tiger from Art. Unmistakable silhouette. Long barrel. Square turret. The beast of the German armored corps. Behind it, more tanks. Panzer force. 3 of them. Medium tanks. Fast. Deadly. Then half-tracks. 2 of them. Filled with infantry. Then support vehicles. Ammunition trucks. Fuel tankers. Supply wagons. At the rear, a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun. A flak panzer. Protecting the column from air attack. 12 vehicles total. Maybe more behind them in the fog. Thompson reached for his notebook. Started logging. Time. Vehicle types. Direction. Speed. But as he wrote, his brain was working differently. He wasn't just observing. He was analyzing. The column was moving slowly, maybe 10 miles per hour. Cautious. The road was narrow. Steep banks on both sides. Thick trees. No room to maneuver. To Thompson, it wasn't just a road. It was a kill box. A perfect ambush site. If you knew where to shoot, and in what order. He put down the notebook. Reached for the radio. Static. Garbled voices. Nothing clear. He tried again. Adjusted the frequency. Nothing. His radio operator, a corporal named Jensen, shook his head. Can't get through, Thompson. Lines are jammed. Thompson looked back through the periscope. The column was still moving. Closer now. 700 yards. He knew where they were going. The Novul Crossroads. 2 miles north. If they reached it, they'd cut off the supply route to Bastogne. The 101st Airborne, already surrounded, would be isolated completely. Thousands of men. Cut off. In the cold. With no ammunition. No food. No hope. And Ray Thompson was watching it happen. With no orders. No permission. No backup. His loader, Miller, leaned forward. "What do we do?" Thompson didn't answer. He was calculating. The column was tight. Disciplined. German doctrine. Keep formations close. Mutual support. Overlapping fields of fire. But tight formations had a weakness. If you hit the right vehicle, the others couldn't maneuver, couldn't scatter. They'd be stuck. Boxed in. Thompson traced the column with his eyes. Lead tank. Second. Third. Fourth. The third tank. That was the key. Hit the third, and the lead two couldn't reverse without ramming. The ones behind couldn't advance without pushing the wreckage. Then hit the middle. Create another block. Then hit the rear. Cut off retreat. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. A sequence. Controlled collapse. Miller saw Thompson's hand move to the firing controls. "Thompson, we don't have orders." Thompson's voice was quiet. "I know. They'll court-martial you. Maybe. We're supposed to wait." Thompson looked at Miller. "If we wait, they take Noville. If they take Noville, Bastogne falls. If Bastogne falls, how many Americans die?" Miller didn't answer. Thompson turned back to the periscope. "I'm not waiting." He adjusted the gun. Elevation, traverse. Range, 800 yards. Target, 3rd Panzer IV. He took a breath, held it, and fired. The M10's gun roared. The entire vehicle rocked backward. Snow exploded around the tank destroyer. The shell screamed through the air. 800 yards away, the 3rd Panzer IV erupted. The shell punched through the side armor, penetrated, detonated inside. The tank stopped. Fire poured from the hatches. Smoke billowed. The crew bailed. Running. Burning. The German column halted. Instantly. Confusion. The Tiger at the front tried to reverse, but the burning Panzer IV blocked the road. The Tiger couldn't move, couldn't turn. The road was too narrow. Behind the wreckage, the rest of the column was stuck, trapped. Thompson's crew stared at him, shocked, frozen. Thompson didn't look back. He was already reloading, already selecting the next target. "Load!" he shouted. Miller snapped out of it, grabbed a shell, rammed it home. "Loaded!" Thompson traversed the gun, aimed at the 6th vehicle, a half-track, filled with infantry. He fired. The half-track disintegrated. The explosion tore it apart. Bodies flew. The fuel tank ignited. Flames spread to the trees. The Germans were panicking now. Soldiers jumped from vehicles, scattered into the woods. Officers shouted, tried to organize, failed. Thompson moved. He knew staying in one position was suicide. German gunners would track his muzzle flash. He ordered his driver to reposition. 20 yards to the left, behind a cluster of trees. New angle, new line of fire. He fired again, this time at the 8th vehicle, a fuel truck. The result was biblical. The truck exploded like a bomb. Fireball shot into the sky. The blast knocked nearby soldiers off their feet. Trees ignited. The forest floor lit up orange and black. From a distance, it sounded like an artillery barrage. Multiple guns, multiple positions. But there was only one gun. One crew. One gunner. The Germans thought they were ambushed, surrounded. They fired wildly into the trees. Machine guns, tank cannons, mortars, hitting nothing, hitting snow, hitting shadows. Thompson kept moving, kept firing. Each shot calculated, each position chosen for cover, for angle, for confusion. He hit the 10th vehicle, another half-track, disabled. He hit the 4th tank, side shot, penetration, fire. The Tiger was still stuck, trying desperately to clear a path, but the wreckage was too thick, the road too narrow. Thompson aimed at the Tiger, waited, watched. The Tiger's turret rotated, searching for the source of fire. Thompson knew the Tiger's armor was too thick for a frontal shot, but the sides were weaker, and when a tank rotates its turret, the hull shifts slightly, exposes a sliver of side armor. Thompson waited for that moment, that 1-second window. The Tiger turned. The side armor appeared. Thompson fired. The shell struck home, penetrated. The Tiger shuddered. Smoke poured from the vents. Then the ammunition inside cooked off. The entire turret launched into the air. Spinning, landed 20 yards away in a snowbank. The blast shook the ground. Trees swayed. The anti-aircraft gun at the rear toppled over. The German column was destroyed. Not scattered. Destroyed. 12 vehicles. 7 burning. 4 disabled. 1 fled. And it had taken less than 30 minutes. Thompson's loader stared at the destruction. Holy shit! Thompson didn't respond. He was watching, making sure no counterattack was coming. Miller finally said, "Are we going to get court-martialed for this?" Thompson didn't answer. He just reloaded. Because the job wasn't finished yet. Hours later, American intelligence interrogated captured German soldiers. A lieutenant, face covered in soot, coat burned, eyes wide with shock. "How many guns attacked you?" the interrogator asked. The lieutenant struggled to answer. "Many. 6. Maybe more. It was a full battery." The interrogator exchanged glances with his colleague. There hadn't been a battery. There had been 1 M10. 1 gun. "A battery?" the interrogator pressed. "You're sure?" The lieutenant nodded frantically. The fire came from multiple positions, different angles. It had to be multiple guns. Other prisoners said the same thing. Some claimed there were 8 American tank destroyers. Others swore they saw muzzle flashes from 3 different hills. One young soldier, barely 20, insisted there were mines, booby traps, sabotage. It couldn't have been just gunnery. But there were no mines, no booby traps, just Ray Thompson, moving after every shot. In their confusion, the Germans had invented enemies that didn't exist. Fear filled the gaps. Panic created phantoms. Even experienced tank commanders reported seeing American armor deeper in the trees. Silhouettes, shadows, movement. They simply couldn't believe one man had done this. It was impossible. But Thompson hadn't used brute force. He'd used geometry, sequence, timing. He'd hit the 3rd vehicle first, created a roadblock, then the 6th, jammed the middle, then the 8th, cut off retreat. Each shot was surgical, each position calculated, each movement designed to confuse. To the Germans, it felt like an ambush by a full American battalion. Coordinated, planned, executed with precision. The truth? 1 gunner, 1 tank destroyer, 1 decision. Talking to Geister Battery. The Germans had a name for it. Die Geister Battery, the Ghost Battery. Survivors from that column would carry the story for years. Tell it in hushed voices. The ambush that came from nowhere. The guns they never saw. The American gunner who fought like a phantom. Some claimed to have heard whistling. Others swore the trees themselves opened fire. One officer wrote in his diary, "We were destroyed by an enemy we could not see. It was as if the forest had turned against us." When American forces moved in to clear the road, they were stunned. The wreckage looked like an airstrike, vehicles stacked like dominoes, burned out frames fused together, frozen corpses scattered across the snow. But what was missing, what made it so strange, was the absence of American casualties. There were none, because there had only been one gunner. And he'd never been hit. For 48 hours, Ray Thompson expected to be arrested. After the smoke cleared, after the Germans fled, or died, after the forest went silent again. He sat in the M10, motionless, his hands still gripping the controls. His loader offered him water. Thompson didn't respond. The adrenaline had drained. Now came the dread. They had disobeyed orders, fired without permission, revealed their position, and regardless of how many German tanks were burning, the military had rules. The report mortor. Back at battalion headquarters, Thompson filed his report, written in his careful, precise handwriting. Range estimates, firing sequence, target selection, diagrams. Captain Langston read it without saying a word, flipped through the pages, his face unreadable. Finally, Langston looked up. "You know, if this had gone wrong, if even one of those had been friendly fire." Thompson nodded. "I know, sir." Langston stared at him. "No one authorized this, Thompson. You understand that?" "Yes, sir." Langston exhaled. "Go get some rest. I have to send this upstairs." Upstairs meant division command, which meant scrutiny, which usually meant punishment. Thompson returned to his crew. They were quiet, waiting. No celebration, no backslapping, just waiting for the hammer to fall. The hammer that never fell, but the hammer didn't fall. Not immediately, because something else happened first. Scouts from the 101st Airborne arrived, 2 days later. Faces hollow, eyes red from sleepless nights and frozen foxholes. They'd expected to find the forest road crawling with German armor. Instead, they found twisted wreckage, burned out tanks, a road they could use. "Which unit took this out?" they asked. Langston hesitated. It wasn't a unit. It was one gunner. The word spread, fast, through mess tents, supply lines, radio chatter. The guy from Kansas who took out a panzer column by himself. Some exaggerated. Said it was 15 tanks. Said he did it with 3 shells. Said he used trick shots. But in the middle of the legend forming, the official investigation began. Division Intelligence reviewed Thompson's field notes, interviewed his crew, tried to confirm his radio situation. They couldn't prove disobedience, because there was no clear record of orders being received or denied. The lines had been jammed. Thompson had tried to report. Nothing came back. What they could confirm was the result. 7 vehicles destroyed, 4 disabled, 0 American casualties. 1 strategic road held, 1 airborne division reconnected to supply lines, and 1 decision, made in silence, without clearance, had kept that corridor open. The verdict. Langston was called to relay the final decision. He expected a reprimand. What came instead was unusual. The division commander said, "Don't put this in the official briefing, not yet. But tell your gunner we'll be watching his work." Thompson didn't receive a medal. Not then. But he wasn't court-martialed either. Instead, he was quietly assigned to train other gunners on firing pattern theory, how to disable convoys through sequence rather than brute force. No one said the word hero. No one saluted, but his diagrams were sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to the U.S. Army Artillery School. That's when Thompson realized something. They hadn't just forgiven what he did. They were studying it. The conversation. Weeks later, Langston approached Thompson. Evening. Thompson was cleaning a breach. "You know," Langston said, "I was ready to report you for insubordination." Thompson looked up. Langston shrugged. "But then I read that line in your notebook. The one about controlled collapse. What did you mean?" Thompson wiped his hands. "When you pull one stone from a wall, the rest falls. If you know where to pull." Langston smiled. "Next time you decide to knock down a wall, just give me a little warning." Thompson didn't smile back. He just nodded. Because to him, it wasn't victory. It was necessity. A calculation. A solution. And deep down, he knew it could have gone the other way. But war doesn't always punish disobedience. Sometimes it learns from it. Ray Thompson never asked to be remembered. After the war, he went home to Kansas, married a girl named Helen, started a small repair shop near Dodge City. He fixed tractors, built grain silos, taught his son geometry by drawing angles in the dirt. He never called himself a hero, but others did. Asymmetrical engagement sequencing. Years after the Battle of the Bulge, the Army quietly began teaching something new. They called it asymmetrical engagement sequencing, a fancy term for a simple idea. Don't aim for the front, aim for the collapse. The case study they used, a single engagement outside Neuville, Belgium, December 19, 1944. They showed overhead maps, wreckage patterns, firing trajectories, vehicle placements. No names were given. The file was unclassified, buried in artillery doctrine manuals that most officers never read. But the students at Fort Sill studied it because it worked, because it saved lives, because it changed how they understood what one gunner could do, not through firepower, but through geometry, through logic, through willingness to act when orders fell silent. The revolutionary concept. Thompson's firing pattern became doctrine, not officially, but quietly, in training manuals, in tactics classes. Create artificial choke points through selective targeting. Exploit the enemy's formation discipline against them. Was taught to tank destroyer crews preparing for Cold War Europe, how to stop Soviet armored columns, how to turn tight Soviet formations into death traps. The concept was revolutionary, and it came from a Kansas farm kid who'd never attended college. The historian. Decades later, a military historian found the original field report, buried in a cardboard box, stamped with faded ink. He tracked down Thompson, now in his 80s, quiet, slightly deaf, living in a modest home with his wife and a cat named Murphy. "Tell me about that day in the Ardennes," the historian asked. Thompson took a long time to answer. "I remember the trees, how still it was before the first shot, like the world was holding its breath." "Why didn't you wait for orders?" Thompson's answer was simple. "Because by the time the radio worked, it would have been too late." He paused. "I didn't break the rules. I just stepped past them for a minute. Long enough to do what had to be done." That answer never made it into official history books, but it stuck with the historian. And maybe now, with you. Ray Thompson didn't win the war, but he saved a road. He saved a column of paratroopers. He saved a moment. And in war, sometimes that's everything. He reminded the Army that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it calculates. Sometimes it pulls the trigger not out of defiance, but out of deeper duty. The paradox. A man who disobeyed the chain of command became the model for flexible battlefield thinking. His unauthorized firing pattern was integrated into Cold War doctrine, into modern military training. The ultimate paradox. The soldier who broke orders became the standard. The lesson. Years later, a colonel who'd studied Thompson's engagement summarized it. He didn't break orders. He operated beyond them. That's the lesson. Not disobedience, not recklessness, understanding. That sometimes the rules stop making sense. And when they do, someone has to step forward. Make the call, pull the trigger, not because they want to, but because no one else can. The quiet courage. Thompson never spoke of glory, never claimed credit. When asked about that day, he'd say, "I just did what needed doing." But that phrase, "what needed doing," carries weight. Because war is full of people who see what needs doing and don't do it. Who wait, who hesitate, who follow orders even when orders lead to disaster. Thompson didn't wait. And because he didn't, others lived. That's not just courage, that's responsibility. That's the kind of thinking that changes wars. There's no statue of Ray Thompson, no memorial, no plaque. Just a line in a field manual, and a story passed down through generations of gunners. The man from Kansas who stopped a German column with mathematics, with geometry, with the willingness to step past orders when orders failed. The final word. In 1999, a journalist asked Thompson if he regretted disobeying orders. Thompson thought for a long time, then said, "I regret that I had to, but I don't regret that I did." That answer sums it up perfectly. He didn't want to break the rules, but he understood when rules became obstacles, and he had the courage to act anyway. The legacy. Ray Thompson died in 2003, age 81, quietly, at home, surrounded by family. His obituary mentioned his repair shop, his wife, his son. One line about military service. But to those who study military tactics, his name means something else. It means precision. It means responsibility. It means understanding that courage isn't just pulling the trigger. It's knowing when to pull it. And why. To restore one gunner, one pattern, one moment. December 19th, 1944, the Ardennes, a frozen ridge, one M10 tank destroyer, and a decision that changed everything. Ray Thompson pulled the trigger, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of clarity, out of necessity, out of the deep understanding that sometimes doing nothing is the worst thing you can do. He saved a road, he saved soldiers, he saved a moment in history, and he proved that the rules aren't always right, and that sometimes one person who understands geometry, timing, and courage can change the course of a battle. One gunner, one decision, one pattern, and a German column brought to its knees, not by firepower, but by a man who understood when to step past orders and how to make every shot count. That's the legacy of Ray Thompson, the gunner who calculated, the soldier who thought, the man who proved that sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to do what's right.